everyone. Thank you for coming to our T-Space training for fall 2014 at Trinity University. We're doing this training just to try to make sure that you guys are more familiar with the new T-Space website and what would be required when you're actually submitting your events, because we know that there have been some questions. So really quickly, let's look at the agenda. We'll do a trial run-through of a T-Space reservation. Then I'll go over some quick tips that you should know as you're doing your reservations, other things that you may not see while going through an actual event wizard. And then we'll have a Q&A period of time, so any other questions that you may have, I'll try to go ahead and answer those for you. So let's get started and do a trial reservation. So all of you at this time should have your T-Space login, and you will be going to the web page for tspace.trinity.edu. And once you log in, you'll see welcome and your name at the very top. I'll highlight that for you. And you'll see your home page, and on your home page, it automatically defaults for featured events. And those are usually the big events that are going on campus. They may not necessarily be events that are going on in spaces that you're typically looking at. However, I will talk to you about how you can change it and have it be events that are in locations that you typically have your events, so you can automatically kind of see what's going on in this area that I may possibly want to book. Now, there are two options here. You can see the calendar version, or you can see the dashboard version. And that just quickly tells you, gives you an opportunity to search events, search locations, resources. It'll tell you if you have any events that are drafts there where you're waiting for approval, and etc. So depending upon what your preference is, you can look at either. I personally tend to look at the calendar because I always want to see what's going on in certain areas for the days. So the first thing that you're going to do when you're actually putting together your reservation is go to the tab for the event wizard, and you'll click on that. So there are several areas. You'll want to start off with the very first area, and you'll want to enter your event name. So we're going to do a fictitious event. Well, actually, let's pretend like we're doing this. Let's say T-Space Training Fall 2014. So you'll put in your date. If you have an event subtitle, this is the space where you would include that. And in that area, let's say update on training for T-Space and the new system. So from there, you'll go down to your event type. So for all student organizations, your event type is going to be student organization. So you'll go down and you'll click on student organization. Now, instead of you having to always go through this list, what you can do is go and star that location. So once you star that location, if you click on your start locations, it'll automatically pop up. So that'll save you a step in the long run. So from there, you'll go down to your primary organization for this event. And again, that's going to be the student organization. So we'll go through the same process. Student organization, and then you'll star that. And so it can be found under your start locations. Now, all of you may know this or you may not. The reason why you have to put student organization in both of those categories is that we have a two-step approval process. So first off, the person who is over your segment of the student organization will look at the request that you've put in and make sure all the details are there before they actually will change the type and say meeting or banquet or whatever have you. So if you are a Greek organization, then that's Brianna McGlamory, and she'll look over your event, and then she'll get back to you if there are any questions. If there aren't any questions, she'll simply change the event type to what your event actually will be. For the rest of the student organizations, that's generally going to be Becca Bovio, and she'll be looking at your events, and then she'll make that change. So then you put in your expected head count. Let's put 15 here, and then you'll click on the next button. Then you have the opportunity to put in your event description. Now let me note that all areas that have this red asterisk are mandatory fields that you have to include information. So it can be short, it doesn't have to be super long. We'll put in a description here. We'll say, this training event is to assist T-Space schedulers and requesters. Did I spell that wrong? In submitting reservations. So then from there you have the mandatory field of event date and time. So let's put this in the future. We can click on the calendar icon and we can choose a date. Let's choose Monday. 2 o'clock is fine. You have an option to put your pre-event and setup duration. So a pre-event would be a time period before the event when maybe you have an author coming in, or you have a certain speaker or an advisor for your group, and you want to have a time where your group members can just come in and chat before the event actually occurs. So then you can put in the time period for your pre-event. So if we were, having maybe a little social gathering before this, then let's say we want to put in 30 minutes for your pre-event. Now, aside from that, you may have setup time. So you need to actually maybe move around tables, or you need to bring in some decorations for the room before everyone gets there. So you want to put in your setup time. Let's say we wanted an hour of setup time. And you can see what's reflected for each bit. So although you want the event to actually start at 2 o'clock, you have a pre-event time of 30 minutes. So that pulls it back to 1:30 when your reservation will begin. And then you have a setup time of an hour, so then that pulls it back to 12:30. So right now you're looking at a block that starts at 12:30 for your reservation. But let's talk about when you want it to end. This automatically went to 3 p.m., which is fine. Let's say we want to have a little bit of chatting time afterwards. We can actually put in some time there. So let's put in 15 minutes. So that moves it to 3:15. And then you need to remove all the decorations. You may have to reset the room again, whatever have you. Let's put 30 minutes. So now we're looking at 12:30 to 3:45 as the whole block of time that you're requesting. Now, if this happens to be something that you want to repeat, you can go to this drop-down menu and you can say repeat. So repeats ad hoc would be when it does not have a set schedule. So maybe you're going to repeat again, but it's going to be on the 26th. That's going to be the next date. And then you're going to move forward and you're going to repeat again on the 11th. You can select each and every one of those dates, and it starts populating at the bottom. Now, the other options that you have there is that you can say you want to repeat it daily, weekly, or monthly. So maybe you have a meeting every first Monday. You can put that on there, and then it'll populate that whole list. And then if you want to, maybe it's populated a list of Mondays and you're like, well, actually I'm not going to be there for that Monday because it falls on a holiday, it falls on spring break. You can go down to the bottom and you can cancel it. And that'll take away from that date from your listing. So then it'll list all the Mondays with the exception of the have personally selected that you know you're not going to have a meeting for. So from there we go to event locations. So you should have an idea, you probably have an idea of where you want to have your event. So you can either do a search in there, and let's search for an area. Let's say that we wanted to have an event in Waxahachie. Right. So once you put the event in, it'll pull up. And if you let your cursor hover over the name, it'll give you a picture of the room, it'll give you the room number, and it'll tell you all the features that are available for that room, as well as the layouts that are typical for that room. So for Waxahachie, that would be conference, tables, rectangular, and theater style. You can always do a custom setup of your own and include that in there as well, and I'll show you how you can do that. But before we go to there, let's look at this listing. It tells you the max capacity, and it has the square with an asterisk. So what that means is that there's a date there where there's a conflict. And so that means you can't actually have the room for that date. So it means it's not available. So what you can also do, you can select this room, and you can have it for the dates where there is no conflict, but then you can look at adding on a second room for the date where you may have that conflict, to see if you can, let's go for Woodlawn, to see if you can change, so then you can add Woodlawn. So you can modify the selected occurrences. Okay, you can say you don't want it for that date. Done. And now you have green check marks, and that means that you're good on all of those dates. So if you see that some of your dates have conflicts, you can automatically there kind of move around the system and find other rooms that still fit with your dates and fit with your needs but don't have conflicts and request it through the system. Now, the other thing that you should be able to do here is put in your instructions. So right here we have conference style for 28. If you use the drop-down menu, you can select that you want tables, which is a classroom style, or you can select you want theater, or you can go to none, and you can put in your special setup. So let's do something quirky here. Let's say 4 sections of conference style tables in the 4 corners of the room. And we'll say 4 chairs at each table. So you can put that in. Whatever your desired changes are that you don't see reflected, you can put that in there. So then a very important part is event resources. So you're going to have this event, and maybe you need some special things here. You may need trash cans. You can request a myriad of things through the system. Actually, I think it's always good to just kind of go through and look and see what all is available. There may actually be some things available there that you didn't even know were available. So maybe you want to request a record player. You can put that on there. Or you need a trash can. Put the trash can on there. And then you can put any other details on there, just as you can with the others. You can put some setup instructions like, I want it in a certain place in there. I want the record player in the front, I want it on the podium. You can put those instructions in there as well. So then we'll go next. Go all the way to the top. So this is a super important page. And this is important because all of the work that you've put into this event finally comes down to the requester and scheduler for the event. So all of you should see, first off, we'll talk about your event details will be listed on the left-hand side. So it'll have the name of your event, subtitle, the type, and the sponsoring organization, those two things being the same, your head count, description, time, locations, and resources you've requested. Now, you'll see this list here. This is very helpful because it tells you about the department who has the scheduler over the areas that you're looking for. So Linda Ibarra covers all of these areas. Campus and community involvement cover these areas: athletics, Center for Learning and Technology, the Holt Center, Facility Services, Laurie Auditorium, the library, Jessica Tamario for the library, as well as the Parker Chapel, music, Res Life, and the WIT Center. So the requester is going to be you. It's always going to be you. On the system, you could select someone else, and that could be if you have, if there's another person in your group, perhaps, or something like that who you feel like would need that information, and you're just doing the reservation for them, or you're not going to be around for the event, but you generally are going to be the requester for the event. Now, the scheduler, this is where you need this information. You are not the scheduler. Your organization is not the scheduler. Neither Brianna or Becca are the scheduler, but it's going to be all or any of these individuals that are in bold, or the type or the names of the departments that are in bold. So because you have chosen areas that are in the Coates University Center, you're going to put campus and community involvement. So we'll search. There we go. So then you'll click Campus and Community Involvement, and what I suggest to you is that for all of the spaces where you typically will request for events, star them. So we would star Campus and Community Involvement. If you typically want to have events in Holt, then you'll star that as well. So then instead of you having to type in this information, you can just click your starred locations, and they will pop up at the bottom, and then you can just select them that way. So remember, scheduler, super important, is going to be any one of these individuals that are in the bold. Linda, campus and community involvement, athletics, etc. The reason why this is so important is that if you select the wrong scheduler, they're not going to see it in their queue on the R25 side. So it can delay your event being approved by days, by weeks, until they actually see the event and then say, oh, wow, this group needed to have this reservation, and it may be past that time that you actually wanted it. So it's super important that you put the right scheduler, so when they're going through and they're approving events and confirming them, that they'll see your request there in the lineup. Also, you'll want to make sure that it's correct, because when your overall organization coordinator is looking at it as well, they'll want to make sure that you're asking for the right space. So if there are any admission fees required, invitations, cancel if bad weather, you can check any of those items there, and you can put responses, but that's not a mandatory item, so you definitely don't have to worry about it. And then if you have any notes that you want to put in there that'll be helpful for the scheduler when they're seeing the event, then you can put that in there. What we always caution you about is that sometimes the says it's an internal note, so you still want to make sure that you're using proper English here and that there's not any confidential information that you wouldn't want anyone to see. So that's just the little notes part. So then we'll click next, and this is where the first part of the magic happens. Again, you will see all of the information that you've input. So if you're here and you notice, oh my gosh, I forgot to put a resource on here, you can actually click and go back and you can make those changes. You can add in whatever you need. Once you review all of this information, you need to make sure that you click the agree after reading this statement about the policies governing facilities use, campus and programs with minors, serving alcohol at university events. And if you're not familiar with the policy, we do have the link here, and you should read it before you click off I agree. But once you've done so, you'll click I agree, and then you'll click next. Let's click finish. So T-Space does its part. So what it tells you afterwards is that the event has been successfully submitted but has not yet been confirmed, and that a scheduler will contact you upon confirmation. So if you looked at it and you're like, okay, I need to make sure I get a copy of this. I understand through the last system that it would automatically send you an email. Well, this system does not automatically send you an email. You have to actually email yourself. So you would click here on email, it's working a little slow, yes, and then you can check off yourself that you want it sent to. If you want to send it to the scheduler, you can send it to them too, as a to or as a copy or as a blind copy, it's your choice. Anyone with tasks, you can click on there. Anyone with notifications. If you have any additional twos of carbon copies or blind carbon copies, you can include their email address in there as well. But what you definitely want to do is click off the event confirmation detailed. That is what is going to give you the full accounting of everything that is in your reservation. So it won't be just a short blurb of information. It'll tell you all of that stuff that we saw along the left-hand side, and then you just click send. And then that'll go to all the applicable email addresses that you've included. So on this one, the system made some changes. And they put in a preference there, and they'll tell you if there are any changes and preferences on there. So at any point between now and when your event is actually confirmed, you can go into this reservation and make changes. You can always make changes before the event is confirmed. So you can go back in and you can click edit. You can change the number of people, you can change the location that you're requesting, any of that information. But once your event has been confirmed, you cannot make those changes. So let's talk about where we're going to find this. So if you're on the Home tab, which I just clicked on, you can do the drop-down menu and then go to events you have requested. So it should show you events that you have requested there. And then you can right-click on them, and you'll see all of the bits of information about it. It'll give you a quick little view of the time periods and the description that you have. And if you just simply click on it, it'll bring you back to a full calendar of it. And then you can click edit this event up top. And then you can make any changes that you need to make on it. So you can always go and see the events that you've requested at any time. Now let's talk about locations. So if you click on the Locations tab, you can put in any areas that you commonly use. Let's say Tawakona. I think I'm spelling that right. So let's do the list view. This shows you everything that's going on under the calendar view. But let's do the list view for Tawakona, and let's star that location. So then, if you click on the Home tab, on the drop-down menu, you can say Events in your starred locations. And then you can see all the things going on in your favorite spaces. You can also, from this, change the view that you see. So it automatically does a week. But if you click on that time span, it pulls up the calendar, and you can set the start and end dates for the time period that you want to see. And you can say you want to enforce a date range interval of whatever time periods are listed here. 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days max. And then you can update your calendar with your preferred options. So those are the very basics that will help navigate you through the system. Let's talk about some quick tips real quick. All right. So there should only be one T-Space coordinator per group. And that's to avoid the confusion and to make sure that you have somebody who really knows the system and is always there to put it in quickly and hand it off or email it out to all the other individuals who would need to know the information. As I mentioned before when we were looking at the wizard, you want to choose the proper scheduler. Super, super important. Your event type and the primary organization is always going to be student organization for both of those areas. Now, if you're looking at athletic spaces, it can take 4 to 6 weeks to confirm. So you really need to be mindful of that and make sure that you're putting in your reservations super early for it, just so that you'll make sure that you'll have a space actually at that time. And athletic events also require a risk management plan approval before a confirmation is actually given. And so that's one of those steps where your coordinator, either Brianna or Becca, will let you know if a risk management plan is required, and you'll have to complete that. And once that's completed to their specifications and approval, they will change the event type in there, and then it can be viewed and reviewed and approved by the T-Space, by the scheduler. You also want to make sure that if you're holding an event in the Great Hall or in the Holt Center, that you have a faculty or a staff advisor present for the event. That's absolutely must. It's an absolute must. We already looked at favorites. You can favorite locations, you can favorite events, you can favorite for primary organization and event type. There are certain things that you can do that'll make it quicker and easier as you're going through. And so it's a two-step approval process for events. And so what that means is that first off, you have the coordinator who looks at your event, Brianna or Becca. They change it, and until they change it, then the T-Space scheduler will not look at it, will not confirm it. So you want to keep that in mind when you're putting in your reservations as well, because you need to give enough time for them to look through it and to make their approval for it and change it, and then enough time for your scheduler. So if you're using campus and community involvement, we always say 10 school days or 10 business days in advance you should put your request in, just to give enough time for it to be approved, because there are lots of student groups who are vying for all the same spaces and a lot of other issues that come about throughout each day. And so it's really important to have it in early to make sure that both your coordinator is able to look at it and the T-Space scheduler is able to look at it and get back to you as soon as possible. The best athletic spaces for student use happen to be the racquetball courts and the dance studios. So that's also helpful for you to know if those are spaces that you typically look at. So what questions do you guys have? That's a lot of information really quick. Any questions?
Where will we be able to find the video that's been taken on this?
We will be putting it online, so it's going to be a link for campus and community involvement. We'll send it out via Becca and Brianna.
So what should we do in the case of, this happened to me, our group last Tuesday. I received an email from Ms. Ibarra on Monday the 10th saying that our weekly meeting that we had reserved had to be moved from CSI 437 to 448. But another group called Young Life was also in that room and reserved for that time, so we were unable to have a location for our meeting because of the suddenness of that email. So what should we do in that case? Is there someone we can complain to, or?
I think immediately when you find out that there's an issue, you should email back the T-Space scheduler who sent you the email and let them know that that occurred. And I would say also copy on the coordinator. So if it happens to be Brianna or Becca, copy them on there for the communications as well, just so that everyone can be aware. Because I'm sure it was just an error of them not knowing and not seeing that there was another group that was meeting there, and perhaps that group, they may not have had a reservation. Because generally, in the calendar, when Ms. Ibarra is doing it, she would see the conflicts. And so she's not even, we generally, and I'm also a scheduler, we're not able to put anyone in a space where there's another group that's already reserved. So it may have been an issue where they actually shouldn't have been in the space during that time period, but they typically use the space maybe because it's unlocked and it's open, and so she wouldn't have been aware of something like that. Other questions?
So earlier this semester, I had requested and had an event confirmed for the Holt Center, or it was about to be confirmed, and then I was told that even though we were going to be in like the downstairs area, that we couldn't have our event anywhere in the Holt Center because one of the upper rooms had like an SAT review. So I know that in some locations, especially the Holt Center, there are events that we aren't able to see, and even though like the system says that it's open and available, it's not actually. Is there a way to avoid that, or will we ever be privy to that information?
So what I would say with that, I'm imagining that the problem was simply because they're having the testing. It may be noise distribution that would come down from your event or go up and possibly cause issues or disturbances. So if you know that space may have those issues, what I would do is star all the locations for that space, such that when you are looking on the calendar for your start locations, you can see, oh gosh, all of these things are happening in the Holt Center now. Will I be able to have my event? And what I would do from there is just simply call or shoot an email and say, I see that you have this event going on. My group is considering having an event on this day. Would there be any problems or conflicts with us being there during that same time? So that before you even go through the process of putting in your event request, you would have some idea if that would even be an option for that day. So most of the time you can't see things on the calendar because it's not starred for you, but once you can look at all the locations, but you have to star them and pull them up as preferences. So that's the quirky part about this system, is knowing that you need to actually star those locations so that they come up for your view so you can see it. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Other questions?
Lady Cece, if an organization wanted to wanted food for their meeting or for the event, would this be the space that would T-Space be the place that you would input that information to reserve something with Aramark?
So if you plan on having food, I would put in the comments that we plan on serving food. And as an aside, just so you know, for the campus, the default for serving food is using Aramark services. If you're going to bring in food, then you need to obtain a waiver for it. So you would need to work with your coordinator to submit a waiver if you're going to be bringing any other food in or want to bring any other food in outside of using Aramark. But I would just simply put that on there that we're requesting food or we'll be using food and having food for this event, and that allows the scheduler to copy on Aramark. So I would copy on the two individuals with Aramark who are the main folks who handle those reservations, just so that they kind of have a heads up that you'll be contacting them. But it's still going to be your responsibility to contact and make those arrangements with Aramark, so to make your order for your event for that time period. Very good question. Thank you. Other things?
If I have an event confirmed and it gets booted because Trinity schedules one of the main lecture series over it, am I responsible for editing my request, or is that up to someone else?
So generally you would get an email. Usually you would get an email that says then a distinguished lecture series is occurring, and so you cannot have your event for that date. But if you happen to have noticed it before you receive an email about it, then I would just personally just send an email back, respond back to the confirmation email, and preemptively say, this is the date that we would like to choose instead, or this is the time that we would like to choose instead, just so that your request would be higher up in the queue than other people who may have been booted as well. Makes sense?
Yep.
So, the other thing that I should mention for you guys, quite a bit of groups will request the Fiesta Room. So if you're thinking about the Fiesta Room and it's an evening reservation, then you would want to be prepared to possibly do the setup and or reset of the room for your own. And that's because our facilities people are leaving at 3:30 p.m. So if there happens to be an event, say the education department has a training and it's at the Fiesta Room and it lasts until 5 o'clock, and your event actually won't begin until 8 o'clock, well, facilities will not be around to set up that new event for you. So you'll receive information in your confirmation just telling you that you'll need to do the setup yourself, or you'll need to do a reset for the room, or however, at the conclusion of the event. So you should definitely be aware of that. Now, if there's nothing else going on in the Fiesta Room that day, and your event is at 7 o'clock, then you're golden. That means facilities will set up for you. You don't have to worry about that. But in the case of two events going on in that space, one being during the day and the other being during the evening, the responsibility of that setup is going to fall onto you, because there is not enough staff within the Coates University Center to be able to do a turnover of that space. So you guys should definitely be aware of that. If you're doing events that are in the Skyline and Underwood area, then you should also be aware that you can move the tables around into whatever configuration that you need to, but at the conclusion of the event, you're going to have to do a reset back into its normal area. And Once you need to do that, you can always come downstairs and talk to the student assistant at the desk. They do have some plans for that room that can help you in terms of putting back the furniture in the same place that it was. So you're not going to have to completely remember it on your own. We do have some instructions and pictures to help guide that process. So we still keep those spaces available even if facilities aren't here to help, but we just need your help in terms of getting those spaces back into place, or getting them into the configuration that you actually want them in for that day. I would suggest for most of the spaces here in the Coates University Center, when you're requesting them, to put in a 30-minute setup time and 30-minute takedown time. And what that does is leave room in there for if there's an event before you, for the reset to happen. If you don't put it in there, I'm going to put it in there for you, because I just want to make sure there's enough cushion area there, so if we're going from theater to conference style or to classroom style, there's enough time for that turnover to have for the staff at Coates University Center. So we recommend that. If for some reason, when you are requesting your event, we do have the 10 days that I mentioned for Coates University Center, but if you have looked at the calendar and you already see there are a ton of events going on there, I may or may not get into this event, you can always contact Linda Ibarra about some other spaces on campus that might fit your needs. And she's usually able to give a quicker response with that. But with that, you still need to have the approval of your coordinator. So Brianna or Becca would still have needed to approve your event. They'll still have to do that. Okay? Well, a big thank you to you guys for coming out and for your questions. These are all really great questions. We'll have our next official T-Space training in January, and so that's going to be for all the new T-Space coordinators who have been selected by each of your individual student organizations. And it is a mandatory training, and it will be a little bit more robust. So this is just a quick sort of, we'll go through all things, and then we'll have the next training, and we'll make sure everyone is up to speed and ready to have those events in. I'd also say one last thing, if you happen to know any events that you plan on having or your group plans on having at the beginning of the semester, go ahead and put in those events now and put the requests so you can kind of set your group up for those first few meetings. Because if you have a new T-Space coordinator coming on board, they're going to take a little bit to get accustomed to the system. And so you can help them out by going ahead and requesting those first few meetings and events that will possibly be occurring, and then they won't have to worry about that. They won't be in a rush. So, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you.